Hi all, it's Teresa. Well, I love doing acrylic paintings. I'm working in my sewing room that doubles as my painting room, and I'm working on a painting that I've had in mind for quite a while. And I'll tell you the details of the context of this painting during this video. I was looking at this painting that I had bought at a thrift store, and it's hanging in my bedroom. And I just love to do paintings of nature and with a lot of detail and beautiful colors. So this inspired me to get started on my painting. I had bought this frame at a thrift store, and I decided to also use the canvas board. It's an 18 by 24, a nice size to work on. And this is an older one. So I'm using some white acrylic paint to paint over it, and you could also use gesso for this step. So first I have to draw the figures and position them where I want them on the painting. And I'm going to draw them on this tracing paper. After I get the figures drawn on, I use this graphite transfer paper. And this is basically like pencil on the back side of this paper. And just with slight pressure, I can transfer the lines onto the canvas. And when I did the drawing of myself, it turned out to be too small, so I had to increase the size on my computer. These are the inexpensive acrylic paints that I buy at the craft store, and I have a nice selection of basic colors. And likewise, I buy very inexpensive brushes. I think my first set of brushes here was a pack of 10 for maybe $8 or $9 at the craft store. And I use this palette paper to put my paints on. And you could also just use wax paper or a pie plate. And I just have these cotton rags to dry off my brushes after I've rinsed them out in clean water when I do color changes. And I try to change this water frequently so it's pretty clean all the time. This is a favorite memory of mine from my childhood. This is my father and I were catching frogs in this stream that goes down to this man-made pond. This is at a hunting fishing cabin that my family went to a couple times with my parents' high school friends and their family. And even though none of us were into hunting or fishing, we just went up there as a fun weekend trip. We went up there twice, and this is one of my favorite memories. I was so thrilled to find these tiny frogs in this stream. And I don't know how I came across this photo, but it's one of the only photographs I have of my father and I doing a fun activity together. Now I'm just defining each major area of the background. And I'm choosing colors that I think will be a good base for each of these specific areas. And when I paint in acrylics, I use the paint really watered down. So my layers of paint really do show through from one layer to the other. And it's amazing how often the different shapes of these base colors show through. And I can use them to my advantage. Like some of the shapes will look like rocks or trees, and I just add in details and use those shapes. So it's interesting to see how the painting evolves like that on its own. And now that I'm satisfied with the angles and proportions and sizes of each of these major areas of the background and the position of the figures, it's time to start putting in some detail. Usually when I paint, I start from the very furthest areas of the landscape and move forward. But since I like rock so much, I couldn't resist getting to these details of these stone walls and the stones in the stream. And then I started on this dried out grass hillside, just blocking in the major colors. In the very background, I wanted this to recede, and so I didn't want it to be too detailed. When I started on the pond, I was trying to remember from memory the color of this pond. And since I'm just working with a black and white photo here, I had to go by memory for a lot of these elements. When I started on my father's face, I had to take a lot of time because I wanted this to be an accurate portrait of him, and the size of this face is about the size of a postage stamp. So it did take me quite a while of a lot of back and forth painting to get a nice likeness of my father. And I think it does look like my father from what I remember he looked like when I was at this age. Once I got that finished, I didn't want to touch his face anymore in case I messed it up. So I went to the water in the stream and then back to the rocks. I keep moving around the painting because everything has to work together as a whole in the end. This pond, I remember, was full of these big mounds of green moss, and they floated on the top of the water, and they looked like they were connected to the bottom of the pond too. This was not a pond you would want to swim in, but it was really difficult doing this by memory, so I was using photographs of a pond that I had painted in another painting as reference. I still wasn't happy with the way the pond looked, so I moved on to different areas of the painting until I figured out how I was going to do this pond. And then I Googled pond with moss mounds, and I found some good pictures to use as reference, and then I was really happy with the results. So it was just back and forth looking at the photo for reference and looking at the painting and deciding how I wanted it to look. And then I started adding these leaves floating on the pond, and I just had to make sure they were placed in a random order so they didn't look like polka dots. So finally my painting was finished, and I really did like the way it looked. It makes me feel happy that now I have this memory as a visual that I can look at every day. And I'm finding that I'm way more motivated doing my paintings if they are a subject that is very dear to my heart or connected with a memory of a past time in my life. I didn't feel the need to make it look exactly like the black and white photo, but it's pretty close anyway. But I used my choice of colors, and that's partially what makes it feel so happy to me. So I hope this video gave you some ideas of projects that you can do. And if you have any questions about acrylic painting, just leave me a comment below and I'll get back to you. And if you like this video, can you please give it a thumbs up? And thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate the viewer support. Bye-bye.